The modern supply chain is an illusion of infinite abundance built on a razor-thin foundation of just-in-time delivery. Step into any Western supermarket on a Tuesday afternoon, and you are surrounded by tens of thousands of items, chilled, misted, and stacked to the ceiling. It looks permanent, but it is actually a highly orchestrated logistical hallucination. The average grocery store holds only about 3 days' worth of food at normal buying volumes. If the trucks stop rolling, if a cyber attack freezes the digital ledger of a major distributor, or if a severe weather event knocks out power across a multi-state grid, those pristine aisles empty out in less than 180 minutes. In the wake of that chaos, the value of everything shifts overnight. The high-end organic produce, the artisanal cheeses, the vacuum-sealed prime cuts. They all become liabilities the second the refrigeration fails. Meanwhile, sitting quietly on the lower shelves, ignored by 90% of shoppers during the good times, is a category of engineering marvels that can outlast your car, your phone, and potentially your current mortgage. We are talking about canned foods engineered to survive decades without electricity, without freezing, and without specialized infrastructure. The industrial canning process, originally perfected to prevent scurvy and starvation in 19th century navies, binds nutrition and time in a way that modern technology still cannot beat. Under the right conditions, a simple $2 tin can sit on a dark shelf, completely impervious to the degradation that rot, bacteria, and atmosphere inflict on everything else we consume. Yet the vast majority of households treat these items as absolute structural afterthoughts, buying them in a panic only when a hurricane warning flashes on the screen, or ignoring them entirely in favor of fragile, short-lived convenience. This is the ultimate paradox of modern food security. The cheapest, most durable, and most nutritionally dense survival assets are hidden in plain sight, fully accessible for less than the price of a cheap cup of coffee, while society spends billions on high-tech solutions that break the moment the power grid blinks. If you know exactly what to look for, a handful of specific, humble ingredients can completely decouple your survival from the vulnerabilities of the commercial food grid. These are 12 foundational foods, entirely affordable, that turn a standard kitchen cabinet into an unshakable logistical stronghold. Consider the immediate reality of an unexpected crisis. When the system fractures, the psychological toll on a household is dictated entirely by the status of the pantry. People do not panic because the internet is down. They panic because the fridge is warming up, and the timeline for their next meal has suddenly become an open question. By understanding the specific nutritional profiles, hidden benefits, and deployment strategies of these 12 specific items, you shift from a passive consumer vulnerable to the next supply chain hiccup to an active manager of your own stability. The number one food on this list costs less than $3, offers an almost unparalleled profile of critical nutrients, and is routinely walked past by thousands of people every single day. Building a resilient reserve does not require a massive financial investment or a bunker in the woods. It requires a systematic understanding of the humble items already sitting on the shelves of your local grocery store. Let us strip away the marketing, the aesthetic biases, and the assumptions and look strictly at the numbers, the science, and the cold reality of what keeps people alive when the normal world takes a break. Number 12. Canned tuna. Walk into a grocery store 48 hours before a major blizzard or a Category 3 hurricane hits the coast, and you will see a very specific pattern of human behavior play out in real time. The bottled water aisle is decimated, the bread racks are bare, and the canned fish section looks like a war zone. Tuna disappears faster than almost any other animal protein on the market. This is not because it represents the height of culinary achievement, but because it solves a brutal logistical math equation better than almost anything else in the store. A single standard can deliver 20 to 25 grams of complete protein, packed with essential omega-3 fatty acids and vitamin B12, for a retail cost that frequently hovers between $1 and $2. The true value of canned tuna lies in its absolute lack of operational requirements. It demands no refrigeration to stay safe for years, and more importantly, it requires zero thermal energy to prepare. In a prolonged blackout, when gas lines are shut off or electric stoves are useless, you do not need to burn precious fuel to make tuna edible. You pop the pull tab or turn the manual can opener, and you are holding a fully cooked, sterile, high-protein meal that can be consumed directly out of the metal container. It functions perfectly as an immediate cold sandwich filling, an instant protein injection for a box of boiled pasta, or a standalone survival ration. When conditions offer no other alternatives, the commercial industry typically prints a highly conservative shelf life of 3 to 5 years on these cans. But that date is an economic and legal shield for the manufacturer, not a scientific expiration point. In the food storage community and inside testing laboratories, it is well established that as long as the structural integrity of the steel or aluminum remains uncompromised, meaning no deep rust, no severe denting along the seams, and absolutely no bulging or swelling, the contents inside remain sterile and biologically safe for 10 years or more. The physical quality, texture, and color of the fish might degrade slightly over a decade, but the caloric and protein value remains completely locked in. The fatal mistake most novice buyers make with tuna is the impulse buy stockpile. They read a headline, get anxious, purchase 40 identical cans of chunk-like tuna in water, shove them into the back of a bottom cabinet, and never touch them again. 3 years later, they look at that dusty stack with a sense of guilt and zero desire to eat it, eventually throwing it away during a move. The system failed them because they treated survival food as a separate, stagnant entity from their daily lives. The professional strategy is seamless integration. Add 2 or 3 cans to your cart during your routine weekly grocery run, place the newest arrivals at the back of the shelf, and pull the oldest ones from the front to use in regular weeknight meals. This natural rotation costs nothing extra, keeps your inventory fresh, and ensures you are never stuck with a mountain of food you secretly despise. Tuna is an apex shelf-stable asset, not because it is elegant, but because it completely eliminates the dependency on infrastructure, keeping a household fed when the modern world turns off the lights. The architecture of the modern food supply system is inherently fragile, a reality explicitly documented during historical logistical failures and economic adjustments. To understand how the global population became dependent on a highly centralized 3-day inventory model, it is necessary to examine the post-World War II transition in agricultural logistics and trade policies. Prior to the mid-20th century, domestic food security relied on localized distribution networks, regional grain elevators, and decentralized cold storage units. The introduction of the interstate highway system in the United States, combined with the standardization of intermodal shipping containers in the late 1950s, fundamentally altered the economics of food distribution. Corporations realized that maintaining massive warehouse inventories was a capital inefficiency. By shifting to a just-in-time logistics model, where inventory is kept in constant motion on trucks and trains rather than sitting in stationary warehouses, supermarkets reduced overhead costs by up to 40%. However, this economic optimization created a massive geographic and operational trap. This geographic trap is visible in the physical disconnect between agricultural production zones and high-density urban centers. In the United States, more than 80% of fresh leafy greens and winter vegetables are grown in the Imperial Valley of California and the Yuma region of Arizona. These products are then transported via refrigerated trucks over thousands of miles to major consumption hubs along the eastern seaboard and the Midwest. A disruption at a single logistical bottleneck, such as the major rail corridors flowing through Chicago or the highway choke points crossing the Mississippi River, immediately halts the flow of perishable goods. According to data from the Department of Transportation, a prolonged freeze or structural failure at any of these key transit points can isolate a major metropolitan area from its fresh food supply within 48 hours. The vulnerability is further magnified by the concentration of corporate control. A mere 4 companies control over 80% of the beef processing market, meaning a localized cyber attack or structural failure at just 2 processing plants can trigger nationwide shortages and immediate price volatility at the retail level. The historical development of canned preservation itself was a direct response to military vulnerability and geographic isolation. In 1795, the French military faced severe troop losses due to scurvy and malnutrition during long-distance campaigns. The government offered a prize of 12,000 francs to anyone who could develop a reliable method of preserving large quantities of food for extended periods. Nicolas Appert, a confectioner, discovered that sealing food inside glass jars and heating them at boiling temperatures prevented spoilage. This empirical discovery predated Louis Pasteur's germ theory of disease by more than half a century. By 1810, British merchant Peter Durand patented the use of tin-plated iron cans, creating a more durable vessel capable of withstanding transport over rough terrain. The adoption of industrial canning by the British Admiralty transformed naval logistics, allowing ships to remain at sea for months without relying on coastal port access for fresh provisions. The transition of canned food from a military necessity to a civilian staple occurred during the rapid urbanization of the late 19th and early 20th centuries. As millions of workers migrated from rural agrarian communities into industrial cities, they lost direct access to subsistence farming. Cities like London, New York, and Chicago required millions of calories daily, which could not be supplied by local markets alone. The canning industry scaled rapidly to meet this demand, utilizing automated machinery to manufacture thousands of cans per hour. By the onset of the Great Depression in 1929, canned goods had become the primary stabilizing element in the diets of low-income urban populations. During the economic collapse, when unemployment reached 25% in the United States, the federal government initiated large-scale surplus commodity distribution programs. These programs relied heavily on canned pork, beef, and vegetables due to their long shelf life and ease of transport without cold chain infrastructure. The structural reliance on these preserved items became a formalized component of civil defense planning during the Cold War. In the 1950s and 1960s, the United States Office of Civil and Defense Mobilization established guidelines for household survival in the event of a nuclear exchange or systemic infrastructure collapse. The government officially recommended that every family maintain a minimum 2-week supply of shelf-stable foods inside home fallout shelters. This policy led to the widespread commercial production of fortified canned items, specialized survival rations, and high-calorie meat products like Spam, which were engineered specifically to resist radiation degradation and atmospheric exposure. The strategic logic was clear. In a systemic crisis, survival is determined not by financial wealth or technological sophistication, but by the physical possession of sterile, non-perishable calories that require zero external energy inputs to consume. Today, this historical lesson is frequently obscured by the convenience of digital grocery applications and overnight delivery services. The consumer landscape operates under the assumption that the supply chain is a permanent fixture of geography, rather than a fragile network of moving vehicles. When an exceptional event occurs, such as the supply chain bottlenecks observed in 2020, or the localized infrastructure failures caused by major regional blackouts, the systemic vulnerability becomes immediately clear. Retail panic buying is not an irrational psychological phenomenon. It is a predictable reaction to the sudden realization that the just-in-time system has failed. The individuals who navigate these disruptions successfully are those who understand the geographic and historical reality of food logistics, maintaining decentralized reserves that operate independently of the commercial grid. The history of food preservation demonstrates that stability is achieved only when nutrition is decoupled from the immediate availability of transport, electricity, and corporate distribution networks. The contemporary food landscape is defined by an ongoing structural conflict between localized infrastructure limitations and corporate supply chains, a reality exposed by recent regional disruptions and economic reports. In 2024, the United States Government Accountability Office released an analysis indicating that over 40 million Americans reside in areas categorized as food deserts where access to fresh, non-processed nutrition is geographically restricted. Within these zones, the retail economy relies almost entirely on small-format dollar stores and independent corner markets. These establishments do not possess the cold chain infrastructure, such as commercial walk-in freezers or climate-controlled loading docks, necessary to maintain fresh produce or raw meats. Consequently, their inventory profiles are heavily weighted towards shelf-stable, canned items. This structural reality forces a significant segment of the population to rely on canned goods not as emergency backups, but as their primary daily source of dietary protein and essential micronutrients. This operational reliance becomes critical during climate anomalies and systemic grid failures. Data from the North American Electric Reliability Corporation indicates that over 2/3 of the continental United States grid faces elevated risks of localized blackouts during extreme summer heat waves and winter storms due to peak demand and aging infrastructure. When a regional grid fails, the financial and physical losses within the commercial food sector accumulate rapidly. A standard commercial supermarket loses an estimated $10,000 to $25,000 worth of perishable inventory for every 12 hours it remains without electrical power. During the major multi-day grid failure in Texas, commercial distributors were forced to discard hundreds of tons of spoiled dairy and meat products, while municipal water treatment plants ceased operations. In these specific operational environments, canned items like black beans, kidney beans, and canned chicken serve as the sole remaining barrier against widespread municipal nutritional deficits. The internal economics of the grocery industry further complicate the availability of these items during a localized crisis. Under normal operating conditions, large supermarket chains utilize automated inventory management systems tied directly to point-of-sale registers. When a specific item's stock drops below a predetermined algorithmic threshold, an automated reorder is sent to the regional distribution hub. However, this system is incapable of anticipating sudden nonlinear surges in consumer demand, such as panic buying prior to a predicted meteorological event. When thousands of consumers attempt to purchase shelf-stable proteins simultaneously, the local retail inventory is exhausted within hours. Because regional distribution centers operate on rigid, pre-scheduled trucking routes, a store that has been cleared of canned staples typically requires 48 to 72 hours to receive a replacement shipment, assuming the transportation infrastructure remains fully functional. Furthermore, a deep dive into the specific nutritional and physical characteristics of these items reveals why they remain superior to modern alternatives like freeze-dried survival meals. Freeze-dried rations require a mandatory input of clean, potable water to become edible, typically at a ratio of 2 parts water to 1 part food. In a severe infrastructure failure, where municipal water systems are compromised or contaminated, utilizing scarce drinking water to rehydrate food creates a dangerous resource trade-off. In contrast, canned vegetables and meats are processed using high-pressure steam sterilization within the sealed container, meaning the liquid inside the can is completely sterile and physically integrated with the food. Industry reports from the National Canners Association verify that the packing liquid in canned vegetables contains up to 40% of the water-soluble vitamins, specifically vitamin C and B-complex vitamins, that leach out of the food during the heating process. Consuming this liquid rather than discarding it ensures maximum nutrient retention without expending external water reserves. The conflict between regulatory safety standards and actual physical preservation limits is another point of operational tension. The Food and Safety Inspection Service enforces strict labeling laws requiring manufacturers to print Best By or Use By dates on all commercial food packaging. These dates, however, are legally defined as indicators of optimal flavor and texture quality, not safety thresholds. Laboratory testing conducted on canned provisions recovered from historic shipwrecks and long-term storage facilities has repeatedly demonstrated that canned meats and vegetables remain chemically stable and microbiogenically safe decades after their manufacture, provided the anaerobic seal remains intact. The primary factor limiting the lifespan of a modern tin can is not the food inside, but external atmospheric conditions. High humidity accelerates external oxidation, leading to rust formation that can eventually puncture the metal, while extreme thermal fluctuations can degrade the internal enamel lining designed to prevent acidic foods from reacting with the steel body. This systemic reality has created a distinct operational divide between traditional consumers and experienced logistical planners. While the average consumer continues to view the availability of fresh, globalized food options as a permanent baseline, municipal emergency managers and military logistical experts structure their contingency plans entirely around the durability of the humble tin can. The survival of civilian populations during prolonged infrastructure disruptions depends directly on the decentralized distribution of these non-perishable calories. The analytical tension lies in the fact that the very items dismissed by modern culinary trends as low-tier options are the exact assets required to maintain societal stability when the complex, just-in-time logistical networks that support